You know, I think this game is pretty good, but let's be real here, this is no one's favorite Zelda game.
Yeah, that's fair.
Welcome back to the channel, ItsGheb here. We're coming back with another episode of our ongoing Zelda Marathon. Last time we talked about my linked playthrough with Oracle of Seasons, which if you haven't watched that video yet, I left a card up top for you. To put it simply, I thought that both of the Oracle games were great, and even though I had a slight preference to ages between the two, I gave both of them a solid recommendation since they're great examples of that classic 2D Zelda feel. And today we have another 2D Zelda game on our hands, but this one is anything but traditional because today we're going to be covering The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords. Not this 4 Swords, this 4 Swords. Yeah, usually when people say 4 Swords, they're probably referring to the GameCube game 4 Swords Adventures, which was released in 2004. But that's actually not what we're covering today. Instead, we're talking about the 2002 multiplayer side mode that was added onto the port of A Link to the Past for the Game Boy Advance. Oh yeah. And you know, I say side mode, but believe it or not, this game actually has a canon place in the Zelda timeline, which means it's actually more of an important title to the overall chronology than something like Hyrule Warriors or Link's Crossbow Training. This was Capcom's next crack at the Zelda franchise, and initially they were working on another traditional 2D Zelda game with the Minish Cap, but they put that project on ice temporarily to work on the multiplayer component for this bundle. And yeah, that's the other thing to go along with this. This is a multiplayer Zelda game that supports up to 4-player cooperation through the usage of the Game Boy Advance link cable. A very novel concept to say the least. I, like many people back in the day, unfortunately didn't own a Game Boy Advance link cable, which as you can imagine, probably limited the amount of people that would potentially be interested in this, so you have to assume it was bundled in with a port of A Link to the Past to get it into the hands of more people. The game sold and reviewed pretty well, but again, let's be real here, most of that data is probably a reflection on A Link to the Past rather than the quality of 4 Swords itself. 4 Swords would go on to have a few more releases over the years, with an enhanced port being made for the DS and 3DS, and a version for the Nintendo Switch GBA online service was also recently put out that even allows for online co-op if you don't mind suffering through Nintendo's typical online functionality. For this video, that was the version of the game I actually played with a few of my friends, but I did also get my hands on the DS Enhanced port, which offered a single-player mode, and unfortunately is kind of hard to come by nowadays. So after experiencing both of these versions, what do I ultimately think of 4 Swords? Well, if we're talking about just the single-player offering on the DS or 3DS versions, skip it. There's nothing here you won't find done far better in other Zelda games. Now, if we're getting into the intended experience of playing this game with 3 other people, I think that's going to be where you see that there's actually still some fun to be had here. It's honestly a chaotic mess, not unlike playing something like New Super Mario Bros. Wii, and that is where the vast majority of the enjoyment you're going to find with this game is. It's got some things going for it, but it's honestly a pretty bare-bones Zelda experience that is propped up purely by the fact that you can play it with friends. But like I said, this game does have a few things to talk about, so let's get into it. We have a lot to discuss today, so without further ado, this is my review for The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords. Audio and visuals are up first, and there's not really too much to go over here, but for an early Game Boy Advance game, I will say, I think it looks pretty damn good. Yeah, we're getting into visuals first, and I think there's a lot to enjoy here. The sprite work on Link is very detailed, the colors are incredibly vivid, but I think the thing that 4 Swords has going for it the most is its art style, especially when it comes to the character design. We've moved past the traditional fantasy mixed with Shaggy from Scooby-Doo Link from the earlier Zelda games, and the drape-haired young Leonardo DiCaprio-looking Link from the N64 games, and we see our first ever iteration of what has come to be known as Toon Link. Yeah, I'm sure the Wind Waker reveal was actually where most people saw the debut of this design, but technically the North American release of 4 Swords predates the Japanese release of Wind Waker by 11 days, so this is the first fully released appearance of this character. I'll get a little bit more into detail about why I like this design next time when I cover Wind Waker, since I feel like that's a much better game to showcase what I enjoy about him, but let's just say that there's a reason that this Link became one of the most popular looks for Link for a while, appearing in 7 out of the 21 mainline titles, with only the classic Shaggy Link design matching them in the same number of appearances, assuming you count the Oracle games as separate entries. So the visuals are pretty solid, and it has a distinction for debuting a new art style in the series. And then we get to the audio, and you know, what can you say? The Game Boy Advance was also never really known for its sound quality. I did think it was interesting we more or less got the same voice for Link that we did again in Wind Waker, even though some of these grunts do sound a bit suggestive. And Jesus fucking wept. Soundtrack is also pretty underwhelming. I mean, it's like, what, only slightly bigger than the NES game's OSTs? And there isn't really a single memorable piece that isn't something we haven't heard before. It's probably the most forgettable soundtrack in the series. But again, this is just a side mode for the Game Boy Advance port of A Link to the Past. You kind of have to hand it to Capcom a little bit for making new sprites and music for this game, because they probably just could have took everything from A Link to the Past and then made a multiplayer mode around it. But they did actually go through a little bit of extra effort here. I appreciate it. It definitely makes Four Swords feel like a more distinct title, even though there isn't really that much to chew on. Speaking of things that there's not a lot to chew on, we have the story. And I only have one thing to say. Oracle of Seasons? Perhaps I treated you too harshly. This is a very bare-bones Zelda plot this time around. So we have Link and Zelda looking at an artifact called the Four Sword, which Zelda begins to give the history on. But not 1 second after she does that, the evil being inside of the Four Sword, Vati, captures Zelda with the intent on marrying her. Link is then instructed by 3 fairies to pull the Four Sword, turning him into a Jolly Rancher assortment of 4 different colored Links, and he needs to collect the silver keys in order to enter Vati's palace. Link does this, seals Vati back inside of the Four Sword, and brings peace back to Hyrule. That's it. Okay, obviously, this is the first multiplayer Zelda game, and in fact, it really is just a side mode to a port of an SNES game. The focus was clearly never meant to be placed on the story, but there is still one here, so I do have to comment on it, and it's just not very good. This is easily the most inconsequential story in the entire series, with probably the only notable contribution being that this is the first game that Vati debuted in. Yeah, whatever happened to this guy? It seemed like for a minute he was being positioned to be the next big reoccurring villain after Ganon, but after Minish Cap came out, he hasn't made a single appearance since. Now most people just associate Vati with Dark Souls lore, but the real ones remember, let me tell you. He doesn't really do too much in this game, but I think his design is kind of cool, and you know, I wouldn't mind seeing him make a comeback at some point in the future. That's really all I have to say about this game's plot though. There's no complications, no other characters, no surprises. It's just a straightforward adventure to save Zelda. Which again, it's not the biggest deal in the world since, you know, the intent is to play this game multiplayer. Most people would probably end up talking over the story anyway, so it just kind of is what it is. Thankfully, the gameplay portion of Four Swords is where the majority of the effort went into, and we have some things to go over here. So first up, Four Swords asks the question, what would it be like if Zelda was a multiplayer game? Well, the closest thing I can say is that Four Swords plays the most like A Link to the Past when it comes to other 2D Zelda games, but with the advent of multiplayer, it completely changes how the game is actually experienced. So yeah, let me say first off, if you don't at least have one other person to play with, you're not playing this game. For many people, that might be a nail in the coffin right there, because assuming you have people available to play video games with you, how likely is it that they'll want to play Four Swords of all things? Well, if you're like me and you're capable of blackmailing some people into it, you and up to 3 other players will take control of a Link of varying colors, which I have dubbed Grink, Rink, Blink, and Pink. Yes, I know he's purple, but we're too far into the joke now, shut up. You'll be tasked with fighting enemies, solving puzzles, and being as much of an obnoxious dick to your other Links as possible.
That's so bullshit.
Which, yeah, let's start with that first. This game will oftentimes turn into a complete clusterfuck, especially if you have friends who like to mess around a little bit. You see, all the Links can interact with each other. They can push each other back with their swords and bows. You can block paths by standing in the way, and even pick each other up and throw them.
Acquired.
Oh, you stole the poopies already, bro?
That's right.
What?
Now for a lot of you guys, you might be thinking, oh yeah, there's definitely enough here for me and my friends to start fucking with each other. But for some of my more well-behaved viewers, you might be wondering, well, why would I want to do that? Well, let me explain. You have to work together with other players to deal with enemies and puzzles, but there is also an air of competitiveness to this game too. This mainly comes with the rupee collecting. See, at the end of the game, you are scored based on how many rupees you get, with a bonus payout for completing a level quickly. The winner doesn't really get anything per se, but just the acknowledgement is enough for some people to want to be a little bit more competitive. Same thing goes with being the first one to grab a heart container at the end of the stage, since only one player can get it. So whenever rupees are on screen, it quickly becomes a scramble to see who can grab the most high value rupees as possible, which sometimes means being a bit of a gremlin and finding ways of taking advantage of other players' work to get their rupees. You add on to all the times that this game asks you to shoot a ball into a particular hole, platform with very minimal space, or deal with the most oppressive ice physics in gaming history, and you have a recipe for disaster since you are given every opportunity to fuck over someone else you're playing with.
Why y'all let me do it by myself?
So now you might be thinking to yourself, well, why don't I just constantly throw my friends off the cliff so I can try to earn as much money as possible? Well, you're a bad person. But hey, I'm a bad person too, and I have the same exact thought. And you know, you probably will have a phase where you do that for a few minutes because it can honestly be kind of funny, but it's also counterproductive. Four Swords is a cooperative game with light competition, not a PvP Zelda game. So killing your teammates will result in the rupee pond being changed to an ever-increasing amount of rupees to revive a downed Link. If you don't have the funds to revive someone who died, that is a wipe for everyone, and you'll have to redo the stages all over again. On top of that, there is a quota that needs to be met in order to get a silver key. Now thankfully, it is the very lenient quota, but if you fuck around too much, you run the risk of not passing a level and having to do it over again, so it's best to play nice with everyone. Well, at least until they either inadvertently or deliberately cross you, and then you let all hell break loose. Oh no.
Wait, I know how we advance through the door. One in front, spamming the shit of this sword. The ones behind, arrow boosting them.
So since you're playing the game cooperatively, what does that ultimately look like? You can basically boil this down to two things: the combat and the puzzle solving, and if I'm being honest with you guys, neither one's super deep. The combat side of things will have you kill enemies you've seen before, such as moblins and octoroks, but there are a few enemies that will require you to work together in order to damage. These mainly come with the bosses, who will have different color areas that only certain links can attack, or have certain color projectiles that the matching link has to deflect. It's simple shit, and the puzzles are even more straightforward than that. They basically just amount to either having all the links stand on a particular switch, or everyone pulling or pushing a rock, or lighting a torch on fire by clashing swords. It's probably the least impressive that the puzzles have been outside of the NES games. I think this was done with the intention of keeping the pace of the game up, but I don't know, man. I think the last thing that this game has is an issue with its pacing. There are 3 stages in this game, each with 2 levels and a boss fight, before finally taking on Vati's Palace, which is more of the same. Now these levels have different aesthetics and challenges in each, but the way that these levels are laid out is kind of weird. So from what I can tell, it seems like all of these dungeons in this game are procedurally generated, which on one hand is great because you will sometimes get a different experience when playing through a level, but on the other hand, it really does make these areas feel like they have very little intentional design, and they don't really come off as super memorable. Plus, some of these levels can turn out to be short, and I'm talking you're finishing these in less than 5 minutes short. This is not a very long game. Let me put it like this: unless you are either going for 100% or you decide to see how high of a kill count you can get on the other links, you are beating this game in about 2 hours. Yep, 2 hours. Now once you clear the game the first time, you do unlock another level of difficulty, which upon completing unlocks another that makes the rupee quota a bit harder and adds some extra boss fights at the end of Vati's Palace, but things aren't really changing that much otherwise, and I don't know why you would really want to do more of the same. I think Four Swords is at its best when you get a group of friends together, play it for an hour or two, and then put it down. Stretching it beyond that mark by doing additional playthroughs that only have an increased rupee quota, I don't know. I don't really think it makes it more fun. But hey, if this game really clicked with you and your friends, then, you know, you always have this option, I guess. So there's only a few more things to go over when it comes to OG Four Swords, so I just figured I'd group them up here. Most interestingly is the way that this game handles its items. Instead of every link having an inventory that they have to switch through that could potentially bog down gameplay, around the level there will be these pedestals that will house a particular item on each, and one of the links can grab them and use them at their leisure. You see plenty of things that you might expect to return, like the shield, bombs, bow, boomerang, and Pegasus boots, you know, the Zelda staples. I was also really surprised to see the return of the Rock's Cape and Magnet Glove, one whole game after they made their debut, and I honestly didn't think they came back after seasons, so way to make me look like an idiot, Four Swords, thanks for that. We do see 2 new items this time around, one being the Chain Chomp, which I guess technically isn't new since you had it in Link's Awakening as a quest item, but this time it's been upgraded to a full-fledged item that works basically the same way. The other new addition is called the Gnat Hat. This will shrink Link down to microscopic size and be able to enter new areas. Okay, getting a little bit of a precursor to Minish Cap, I see. That's pretty cool. The kind of lame thing here is that since all of these dungeons are randomized, you aren't ever actually guaranteed to come across all of these items. Like in my solo playthrough on the Anniversary Edition, I found the magnet gloves, but on the original, they didn't make a single appearance. Also, there's never really that much of a choice involved with these or a reason to switch your items around. Once you come across one of these pillars, you can pretty much take the item that's there and run with it until you find another one, which really doesn't make it seem like these items matter that much outside of the initial use you have for them. Beyond that, there are some occasional drops that can boost Link's power, defense, and speed, and these actually provide some pretty substantial buffs, which give you another reason beyond rupees to be the best grass mower or pot smasher you can be. The only other thing to go over with this version of the game is how it interacts with A Link to the Past in the GBA. It's nothing on the level of the Oracle games, mind you. In fact, it really only amounts to learning a new sword technique and having an extra dungeon with an encounter with Dark Link at the end of A Link to the Past. Is it enough to make me play through this game again so quickly? No, but the effort's appreciated, and, you know, who knows? Maybe next time I play through A Link to the Past, I'll give it a try on this version. Last thing to cover is the Anniversary Edition features, and there's not really too much to go over here. The most notable feature right away is that yes, you can play this solo. The way this works is kind of familiar to anyone who's played Four Swords Adventures solo before, but you essentially are always in control of 2 Links, with one lagging slightly behind like their tails in a classic Sonic game. At any time, you can take control of this Link to perform actions, leaving the other Link in this catatonic state. Is he okay? But with the simple push of a button, you can pull out your whistle and have your other Link rush over to you like it's a fucking Pikmin game. We also have the addition of some legacy levels unlocked after defeating Vati to give us some layouts from A Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, and Zelda 1, and these are honestly a pretty cool post-game reward. But I'm gonna be real with you guys. Don't play the game this way, just play it off of the Nintendo Switch Online service. There are a lot of reasons for this, actually. First off, this game was a downloadable title for the DS and 3DS eShops, but since both of those are down now, that makes getting your hands on this a little bit tricky. Well, let's say you decide to emulate it. Unfortunately, that's not really a great way of playing this with other people either, unless you use Parsec or something, but even then, this game probably isn't worth the effort, since the runtime of this game might actually be shorter than the setup time for an emulator and a remote desktop app. Then the single player is just not worth your time either, I'm sorry. There's not a single thing done in this game that's not done far better in most other Zelda games, and if you take away the chaotic multiplayer, you're just kind of left with nothing of a game here. Bit of a downer point to end things on, so let's recap my thoughts on Four Swords real quick. Four Swords by yourself, it's not good. It's not possible to play for most people, and if you are able to get the Anniversary Edition, it's just a boring waste of time that I don't think anyone actually wants to play outside of just being curious for historical reasons, or wanting to say that you've played every Zelda game, or making shitty YouTube videos. You might think this game is decent solo, but let's be real here, this is no one's favorite Zelda experience. Now, playing the game multiplayer is a far different story. I don't think this game is deep by any means, it's really, really short. Hell, you could probably even make a strong argument for this being one of the weakest overall Zelda games. However, if you do get a group of friends together, I think you can have a lot of fun here. Is that because of the game, or is it because of the people that I've played with, though? Well, that's also a good question. I view Four Swords much closer to a party game than I do a multiplayer dungeon crawler. It's because of that I think there are a lot of goofy antics to be had, which is where I think the game clearly shines the strongest.
This is just like the end segment of the video. It's just us trying to land on the button. We're just sucking each other off.
King of the Hill.
I think if you go into Four Swords with that mindset and a group that's all on the same page, you're gonna have a good time. If you're looking for something a bit more serious, or you don't really have a group to play with this, I would maybe just skip this one. I know this game definitely isn't for everyone, but for the few hours I had with it, I definitely had my fun. I still liked it more than Zelda 2 if that tells you anything. But that's all the time I have for you guys today. Thank you for watching. What was your favorite memories of The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords? Please be sure to leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. And hey, if you enjoyed today's video, maybe consider giving it a like and subscribing. Thank you guys again. I'll catch you in the next video.